I'm excited.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Meg and Jen Show. We are super excited today because we're going to be talking about the concept of sizeism. And as a quick reminder, sizeism is discrimination or prejudice based on someone's height and or weight. So as we dive into this, I'm curious, Jen, how do these issues around someone's size
Mhm.
impact your world? Do you have any personal experiences with it? I know I have quite a few, but let's dive into some of the personal experiences of it, and then we can talk about how it impacts our business as well.
Ooh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here again. I feel privileged to be here, so thank you. Okay. So, first of all, let's be real, I did not know about this concept until you brought it up. So, I'm so lucky to have you around me and teaching me all these things that I did not know. So, yeah, coming from a person that not only am I a woman, Latin, right, and I'm also a business owner, and so for me, image has always been instilled since I was a very little girl. And I obviously don't think it was on purpose, but my parents really, including my mom, like self image and your body image is extremely important. It's
Mhm.
very important because if you don't look a certain way, you are not taking care of yourself, or you don't love yourself enough, or you are going through depression or something, right? So I certainly grew up in a family where being thin and good looking was very important. Now that I'm older, right, I see like, okay, we create personalities, we create identities based on certain things we hear from adults telling us as children. I remember one time a family member said to me, "Oh my God, um, your love handles are like huge. And
Mm.
what boy is going to want to dance with you if he's holding your waist? And what boy is going to want to dance with you?" I probably was like 12 years old. So now that I understand like the impact of that, like, oh my God, of course, I grew up thinking something's wrong with my body, always. So I became obsessed when I was 17, I was really depressed because I was actually 140 pounds and I'm 5 feet. So that was for me, chunky. So my high school years, I was never like the thin girl. No way. I was
Mhm.
actually overweight. So I remember making that decision. No, I'm not gonna live like this. So since then, I had this unhealthy relationship with who I was authentically as a woman versus who I needed to be. Right. So it wasn't until my maybe 20s that I made peace with my body through understanding that it wasn't about how I looked, but it was about how I felt. So I took on running and exercising to feel better. And I haven't stopped ever since. So I think that became the actual context, not looking good. There was
Yeah.
there's huge. I mean, I've heard so many things like from guys, boyfriends I dated. Oh, if you were thinner, you would be so much prettier. Oh, if you have such a beautiful color on your skin. If you were thinner, you would be so. Oh my God! Like I wish I would have had the education I have now to slap them in their face and be like, I'm out.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's.
And as you share that, there's so many stories of intersectionality, right? You're talking about physical appearance, which is what we call lookism. And
Hmm.
society has determined someone's physical appearance and looks based on their size. And
Yeah.
they're two very different things. I mean, there are people who find people who are overweight very attractive, and then
Right.
there are others who do not. And you also
Right.
talked about what boy would want to dance with you. Well, what if you wanted a
Hmm.
girl to dance with you, right? What if you wanted
Exactly.
someone
Right.
non binary to dance with you? So there's so
Yep.
many stories of the stories we tell ourselves and also the stories that our families tell us at a very early age. I know we've talked about this before, but our families and our school systems, all of those first thoughts or those kind of first things
Yeah.
that run through our brains are cemented by the age of 12. So think about
Yeah.
all the things that were told to us
Hmm.
before the age of
Hmm.
12 that now live on. Whether you believe them or not in your heart, whether you live your
Hmm.
life for that like that or not, they're still in your brain because they're there from those synapses that were
Right.
formed by
Right.
the age of 12.
Subconsciously, they're there,
Yeah.
ingrained. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the scary part, isn't it? Like, we hope that with this podcast, since you're teaching everybody about this, that people really start writing down authentically who they think they are, trying to get away from what they learned. I think writing down, journaling is a very good practice to really get to the core when
Hmm.
nobody's listening, when nobody's saying anything, to see who you really are, to like really nail it down. Yeah, yeah, it's so true. I have my son is 5. Um, I haven't mentioned anything about him wanting to be a girl or wanting to be a boy. It's just has
Hmm.
been about accepting him. Do you know Bashard? I'm sorry that I'm talking about this.
Uh-huh.
He's
Yeah.
okay. So he says our soul is non-binary. Our soul is not either a girl or boy, right? So what we feel strongly in the physical realm is whether we attach to male sex or female sex or none, it doesn't matter. Like,
Hmm.
it's our soul doesn't relate to that. That's just
Right.
in the physical reality. And that is so important. Like, I wonder people's full potential, what it will look like. Full potential, genius, potential, not just on the surface successful, right?
Right.
What else could happen? Like, what kind of difference could you possibly make if you allowed that to be the truth, right?
Yeah.
And so I want my son to experience that. Hopefully, we give him the foundation that he deserves to just choose what it is he wants to be. Who cares? It's his life.
Right. And it's about just being, right? It's not
Yeah.
even about that. I know when I was very large, right? I have lost a lot of weight, but throughout my
Right.
childhood and up until my early adult years, I was very large. I was at
Right.
my highest just under 500 pounds.
Right.
And to be at that size and now to be at the size I am, I'm taller, but I wouldn't say I'm excessively tall. I'm 5'9". So I'm
Right.
taller than many women. I'm taller than the average woman, but I would not consider myself excessively tall. So as far as the height, I don't have
Right.
any stories around that. But as far as weight, I went from being extremely overweight to at one point after I had gastric bypass surgery to lose a
Hmm.
lot of my weight. And
Right.
after that surgery, I got down really, really low. So I went from being excessively overweight to excessively underweight. And I saw both
Wow.
sides. I mean, people
Wow.
treated me very differently on both sides. It's not just a one
Yeah.
sided thing where people
No,
are
it's
made
both
fun
sides.
of or discriminated against for being
Yeah.
bigger. I was also treated pretty poorly for being very small.
Oh,
And
me
it's
too.
only when I'm in the middle, like right now, I consider myself average,
Right.
but
Right.
it's
Me
only when
too.
you're
Me
in the
too.
middle
Yeah.
that you don't necessarily see that.
No, you don't hear people say anything. I've gotten. You're so right about that. So
Hmm.
I also like went down to like 100 pounds at some point. And I
Mm.
could hear my mom, "What's wrong with you? What's happening?" And oh gosh, the focus on just how I look, like, it drives you nuts. You
Hmm.
know, my sister, she's slightly larger, I would say. I don't even know if I'm saying the right way to say it, but she's slightly larger than me and or my mom.
Hmm.
And my brother has a way of always mentioning that. And I'm trying to teach him, like, hey, let her be. And I love
Yeah.
that she stands for herself and how she wants to look. And she found a boyfriend that does not care one bit about how
Hmm.
she looks. My husband doesn't care one bit. He doesn't care
Hmm.
one bit. He tells, and I know that. So it's it's making sure you find a person that doesn't see the surface, because that doesn't it's like that's not even important, right? I've also gotten comments about being short all the time. I'm 5 feet, so short
Right.
is like, right, like, you're little, or you're so petite, or this little Latina, or this little, okay, whatever. I don't see myself like any of those things, right? Who sees themselves like their bodies like, not really, deep inside there's something more beautiful and complicated. So
Right. And I think another thing that comes up around size is the idea of body dysmorphia, because you're talking about how we see
uh,
ourselves, right?
right,
Because I
right.
was so large, I
Uh-huh.
still look in the mirror and see a large person. It's
I
only when
see.
I see pictures of myself that I'm like, no, that was photoshopped, or I
See.
really look like that. Like I'm
Right.
confused because in the
I
mirror, I
see.
see what I looked like 25 years ago.
Right, right.
But when I
I
see
look at pictures
pictures,
too. Yeah, you're like, whoa.
right. Like there's
Yeah,
some pictures I'll be like, is that really me? Whoa, okay.
yeah,
I guess
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not as big as I think I am.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. I have pictures of me in high school. Yeah, and I think the same thing. Um, do you regret any of it? Like, why do we go through this, right?
No, I mean, here's the thing. When I first went through the surgery and lost the weight, I was dating someone who actually liked me larger. And when I
Uh-huh,
lost the weight, he was no longer attracted to me. He still loved
uh-huh,
me, but he was no longer
right,
attracted to me. So we couldn't be together because I want someone who does care about how I look. I want someone who does find
uh-huh,
me attractive. And he
right.
didn't find me attractive anymore because I was losing the weight. Now,
You just,
we're still
yeah.
friends. We talk periodically. And,
Uh-huh,
one of the other things he's recently shared with me is it wasn't just that I wasn't attracted to you, you were starting to get more attention, and that sparked jealousy and
now we're
insecurity,
talking about the real
right?
issue.
But
Right.
I think there is still an element of people have certain things that they find attractive. I think
A
there are
hundred,
certain people who find dad bods attractive. There are certain
yeah,
people who appreciate someone who's a little bit larger. There are certain
yeah,
people who like certain attributes on people.
yeah.
And that's totally okay, normal, human, accessible.
Right,
That's reality. What we need
right.
to do, though, when we're talking about it, is not treat someone poorly because of it. You can have your preferences, right? Preferences are
Right.
not necessarily aligned to negative biases, right?
Huh?
Preferences are human and natural, and preferences are never going to go away. We can all have
Right.
our preferences. What it becomes negative is when we treat someone badly because of that, or if we think that someone is not capable of something because of something that is part of their identity. We can't say that someone is not capable of doing something. Or what I used to hate hearing as a bigger person is, oh, you're so unhealthy. I was
Right.
actually a pretty healthy big person.
Right.
I didn't have any blood pressure issues. I didn't have any cholesterol issues. I didn't have diabetes. I didn't have
Balance.
any of the
Yeah.
typical common
Uh-huh.
ailments that people who are overweight will sometimes have. I
Uh-huh.
was pretty healthy. I had lupus, but guess what? I
Right.
lost the weight. I still have lupus.
Right, right,
So
right. That didn't go
that
away.
has
Right.
nothing to do with my weight. I did not have any of the weight determined medical issues. But we
Right.
hear all the time that heavier people are unhealthy, and we also hear that skinnier people are healthy. I know a
Right.
lot of people who are slender who are very unhealthy,
Very, very
and
true.
vice
Uh-huh.
versa.
Yeah. I consider myself slender, and Dan, my husband, is 13 years older than me. He complains a lot less than he that I do when I'm like, oh my God, my back hurts. Oh, I get a cold like all the time. I have a cold right now. He doesn't get any of that, and I would say a little more on the athletic, body composition than he is. So yes, that has absolutely nothing to do. Hopefully, people identify with what I'm about to say. But when when I was creating this personality of Jennifer, right, going through all these years, um, never did I once thought, what do I really want? It was more about what other people wanted me to be. especially regarding my body and my size. And I remember thinking clearly, I certainly cannot be fat because I would not be getting the job I want in the corporate
Mm,
level. I have to be attractive and I have to be hot. Right?
mm,
It was like, I certainly cannot look nerdy either because, right? I'm not going to be taken seriously or I'm not going to be given a job. Now I remember thinking, well, I'm pretty. I got that going my way, but now I have to lose weight. So there is tremendous pressure
mhm,
for men and women or non-binary, about their bodies and their images, and
mhm,
is the mental stress and trauma that people feel around this conversation. It's like it's insane. It's like around the same stress we experience with money. I
mhm.
consider our self-image at that level of stress. The stressors in our lives, your body image is probably at the very top, you
Yeah.
know?
Isn't
So,
it interesting though, if we look at the trajectory throughout, really in the US, I'll speak about the US, but how
yes.
we have gone from what is depicted as the ideal shape, right? Or the ideal
Right,
size. Because if
right.
you look in history, one of the
Yeah.
biggest figures of like the iconic women figures was Marilyn Monroe. And she was
Yes.
very voluptuous and very
Yeah.
curvy, and she did not have a stick figure body by any means. And then
Right.
we go forward a couple decades, and we had Kate Moss, who was very, very slender, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
now we're back in the area of people are getting fat injections, not necessarily liposuction. A lot of people are getting fat injections in certain
Right.
places, but
Right.
the trajectory of what is considered beautiful by society standards has shifted. And that's why we want, when we talk about sizeism,
Yeah.
it's empowering people to feel comfortable in what they feel comfortable with, right? What size, what
Right.
shape they want for themselves.
Right.
And also about helping corporate and education and society to recognize some of the things that are put in place that diminish
Right.
people's worth because of their size and weight, their height and weight, right? Like think about
Yeah.
airplanes. Going to get on an
Yeah.
airplane, if you are tall, you don't
Yeah.
fit in any of the seats.
No.
I have a good
That's
friend who is almost 7 feet tall.
right.
He can't fit in any seat, even the exit row. His feet are sticking out in the aisle. Like there's nowhere you're fitting. If you're
No.
larger as far as weight, sometimes
Yeah.
airlines used to make people purchase 2 seats.
Right. Right.
You know, it's
Right.
there's so many things that we have to think about of accessibility to buildings, right? Like you're
Right.
talking about
Right.
your work looks at code and building
Yeah.
violations, and
Yeah.
when we're thinking about all of those pieces, looking at doorways, you
Right.
know, my friend who's
Right.
almost 7 feet, if he doesn't duck, he hits his head every time he's going through a doorway.
Right.
Like we
But
saw a video the other day, we're posting on our social media this month, but
yeah.
of a taller, he's a younger, I would say maybe in his 20s, but he's very tall, almost 7 feet, and he's walking around a
Right.
cruise ship. And he's
Uh-huh.
like, I have to duck because the sprinklers, if I hit a sprinkler, it's going to go into my head and set off the sprinklers in the entire cruise ship. The
Right.
shower doesn't accommodate him. He doesn't fit. He doesn't have the ability to stand tall, straight
Of
up,
course not to
anywhere
fit
on the
in that
cruise ship.
shower. Oh my
Anywhere
God.
on the cruise ship, he cannot stand straight tall except in the elevator and when he is
Right.
in like the ballroom area. In his
Right.
room, in the hallway, he has to duck.
Yeah.
Imagine that. And those are
It,
things that unless you're tall, you don't think about it.
exactly. And that's why we're living in this bubble of like, this is who I see and this is what all this regulation applies. All these
The bubble
regulations
of our
only apply to
experience.
this. Yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, we can't see further. We can't think for other people. That's why it's important for people, and I'm so glad that you embrace this and you encourage people to have their own voice, because if they don't, people are completely blind to whatever is happening around the world. If it doesn't happen in their lives, it's not happening anywhere else.
Yeah. My
Is that
next book
simple.
is talking all about the intersectionality of identity and
Love that.
helping people to go outside of their bubble, right? So my
Right.
first book was really helping people acknowledge how we need to
Right.
transition from a savior
Right.
to a change maker and how to take those actionable steps and to
Right.
acknowledge that within ourselves. The next
Right.
book is all about those microaggressions and those first thoughts and those impressions
Right.
that we have about
Right.
people based on societal standards of definitions, right?
Correct.
Like when we
Right.
think about what is socially acceptable for your size, what is socially
Right.
acceptable for your appearance, what is socially acceptable for your gender, all of those
Right.
components of trying to burst that bubble. In my first book, I talk about the White Lake bubble because I grew up in White
Right.
Lake, Michigan. But
Uh-huh.
in the next book, it's going to be focused on how to burst out of whatever bubble you're in, whether it's the
Right.
White Lake bubble, the female bubble, the male
Mhm.
bubble, whatever bubble you're in, you have
Mhm.
to break out of that if you're going to understand anyone else around you.
That's right. And not only understand everyone else around you, but also, hey, awareness is gold. The more aware
Mhm.
you are of what's happening around you and within yourself, honestly, the greatest self-development you will experience. And self-development looks good not only money-wise for those people who, right, who only think about
Mhm.
that, but also within the spiritual realm and family, what's possible for your family, what's possible for the next generation. Yeah, yeah, this is why these topics are so good with you, Megan. I love them. I was actually thinking of doing a couple of things plastic surgery wise, and I was like ready to do it. And I'm still actually really, I haven't felt as confident as I feel right now. These days at my age, I feel extremely confident and I haven't felt better or happier. Like it's just a really good time. So I had to like really understand, am I doing this for myself or am I doing this for society? And I think that
Yeah.
that is the number one question that people should do. And then also embrace it. Because I also started hearing uh, a couple of family members judging my considerations of getting plastic surgery.
Mm.
And I thought, hey, that's not fair. Like now that
Right.
I'm actually trying to get this, that is not fair. Like this is my buddy, right?
Yeah.
Like back off. Right?
And I
So,
think that's the biggest piece is who are you doing it for, right?
right,
I am a
right.
full advocate and proponent of anyone doing anything that they want if it's for themselves.
Exactly. For their
If
for
someone
themselves.
says, "My
Yes.
partner wants me to do this," or "I'm doing this
Right.
because I feel like it will help with this," it
Or I'll
has to
be
be, "I'm
accepted.
doing this because I want this."
Right.
Because here's the
So
thing, as we get to a certain age and even younger, I think there are certain surgeries that happen younger. Actually, I was just doing research on this, but nose jobs, right? So,
uh-huh.
nose jobs are typically done at a very early age because you can tell if your nose is what you want it to look like at a certain age.
Right.
So, like, I have no issue if people are doing it because they want to see something specific in the mirror. If
Right.
they are wanting to do something at some point, you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, "That's me." And you have to feel
Yeah.
good with it. And what I
Yeah.
hope doesn't happen is that people take money away from necessities to be able to do this, right?
Exactly.
As
That was
long
a
as you're
good.
not taking money away from necessities, again, it's about what's going to make you feel good
Mm-hmm.
and asking yourself
Mm-hmm.
the question, like you said, of, am I doing this for myself
That's for
or am
myself.
I doing this for
Yeah.
someone else? Am I
That
doing
is
this so that I
crucial.
feel like I'm lovable? Because that is the number one thing for
Exactly.
plastic surgery.
Exactly. Exactly. And
And if you
oh my
can't
god,
love yourself, you can't expect anyone else
yes,
to love you. And I know that sounds
yes.
cliche, but it's
That
so
is so
true.
true. It's so true. Until I love myself, truly love myself, all of it, all of it.
Yeah.
I met my husband. That's when I met my husband.
Yeah.
And it happened quickly. Like the things that I was forcing and resisting, they were gone. And I could see, wow, like this is what it looks like when you love yourself. So, but it's so true, like financially wise, right? As a woman in business, I remember not being in a place where I could say, "Oh, I want plastic surgery, or I want to do this, or I want to do that." Now I'm like, obviously, I had worked hard, so for me, it's kind of a luxury, right? That I get to do, right? But I still chose not to do it yet. So it's just, I think that for women, what I learned from that experience, though, of considering plastic surgery, gosh, like I don't, it's horrible when people criticize people for what they do to their bodies, like whether they want to look whatever way they want to look like, right? The last thing they want is more criticism, right? So
Right.
yeah, I
And
experienced
there's so
that, and
much
I thought
criticism around not just plastic surgery, but tattoos and body modification, our hairstyle. I mean, if we want to get into the whole idea of
everything,
lookism, there's
everything,
criticism
yeah,
about everything.
it's gonna happen no matter what.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think
So true.
it would be so amazing if we could be in a society where it's not a stigma, right? Where people who
Mhm.
have had any kind of enhancements or surgeries can just put it out there and be proud of it.
Who cares?
And I
Yeah,
just
I
don't
love
think that
when
we're
people
at
are
that
proud of it.
place.
No, we're not. No. I mean,
No.
I love when I see what women have done to mold their bodies, whether it was all natural or not natural.
I was
Uh-huh.
religiously at the gym at
Right,
least
right.
6 days a week, working out with a trainer for probably close to 2 years, and I kept
Uh-huh.
telling the trainer, "My goal is to get a butt." That was my goal.
Right,
And I will
right, right,
tell you
right.
that 2 years, my trainer finally looked at me and said, "I've never met someone who works so hard. You're
Uh-huh.
just not gonna have one." I mean, like, that
Sorry,
was just
girl,
the
it's not
rule,
gonna happen.
right? They're like, "I've never
That's
seen
what
someone
happened
work
to
so
me.
hard. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I can't help you. You're
yeah.
never gonna have a butt." I'm like, "Okay, great. I
Got
appreciate
it.
that. Thank you so
Well,
much."
yeah, so I'm at that point where I'm like really not only watching my diet, but like every workout I do, it's really focused on an area I want to. It's mainly my back, right? So that's the area where I'm like, okay, this is where I want to shape. And it isn't until I like literally deprive myself from eating ice cream or the certain sweet here and there that I get rid of that. And I don't want to do that because eating ice cream
Yeah.
makes me happy, or eating something makes me happy. Like I never feel guilt around certain things I eat that I shouldn't be eating. And that's when I started exploring, like, oh, I see. This is like molding my body the way I want
Mhm.
to. And it's an investment that I'm very lucky I can invest on. Now is my
Mhm.
choice. So going through it all, it was very interesting. Like even my husband kept saying, I love you the way you are. And I was like, like don't go there. Like don't patronize me like that. He's like,
Mhm.
why? I'm like, it's not about that. I love myself. Stop, like stop.
Right.
And he's like, oh, okay, fine. And I'm like, it's
Right.
not about that. Like stop thinking that people do these because they don't love themselves. Like stop that.
Yeah.
So he like, yeah, he completely like got like, okay, got it. But I could see again, it's a choice. It's our body. At the end of the day, if we don't let other people affect us and we don't react to it, at the end of the day, if you do what makes you happy and feel happy for what you have and who you
Yeah.
are, you know, yeah,
And I
yeah,
think it's important to also enforce that it's not just women
yeah.
who struggle with this. I know a lot of men who also
Hmm.
have some body image pieces
Me
that they're like,
too.
"Oh, I wanna
Me
do
too.
this, I wanna do this." So it's not just women, there are
Probably
a lot
more
of
than
men.
women, and they don't talk about it.
Yeah. And there's
Yeah,
a lot of men who are going through procedures and going through different things
yes,
because their metabolism changes as well. It's not just women, and I think that's
yes,
something to really point
right,
out.
yes,
I wanna talk about as a parent, how do you
yeah,
talk about weight or because our children are going to be the size they are
right,
height-wise, there's nothing we can do
yeah,
about that. But how do you talk to your son about weight? Because I know this is something I struggle with sometimes with my own son.
yeah.
Do
I
you
think
talk
I
to him about it
struggle.
at all?
No, but I struggle with it in a way where not yet. I mean, he's going to be 6 in February. He's on the spectrum, so there are things that if I start talking about it, I wonder if he was really catching me. I do talk to him about eating more food. Like he's on feeding therapy,
Mhm.
and the feeding therapy is for him to actually try new foods, not necessarily all healthy foods, but try new foods. And
Mhm.
because he's pretty clear, he doesn't want to try a meatball, or he doesn't want to try broccoli, or he doesn't, right? So I do talk to him about that, and I do mention, and I hope, and tell me what you think, because I'm open to your advice here. I do tell him if he eats more and he eats more kinds of foods, I do say you're going to be stronger, which
Mhm.
kind of gets in the territory of like, ooh, am I saying the right thing?
Right.
Because I do see how diet is important. Like when I eat healthy, I have tons of energy. And that's what I love. And he's kind of on the hyperactive, which I love. I'm just like him. So that's my take on his body image. I just mentioned the word strong. Like I want you to be stronger. I want you to grow stronger, like Spider-Man. So that he's like, okay, I want to be like Spider-Man. So I'm like already
Yeah.
creating this image.
Well,
But I
here's the
just want
thing,
him to have
diverse
energy.
foods and different
Yeah,
foods bring in different nutrients and vitamins. If you eat
right.
all the same thing, you're only getting
Exactly.
one level of nutrients and vitamins. So there
Exactly.
is some truth to
Exactly.
that. I
Exactly.
think where the damage comes in, and I'll say this, I mean, I have done this
Ah,
damage to my son, right? The damage comes
right.
in with I grew up extremely large. His father
Uh-huh.
was large.
Uh-huh.
There are
Uh-huh.
large people on all sides of the family who struggled with weight. And
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't want him to have that same struggle. I don't want him to have to go through the gastric bypass surgery. I don't want him to struggle with some of
Right.
the things that I struggled with. So there's some
Right.
projection going on, right? But I do talk to him about
Inevitable.
like, okay, well,
Yeah.
let's, only one treat a day, or, I
Right.
don't think you need that treat today, or, you know what, you've eaten enough portions, you're good, or
Right.
let's make a
Right.
different choice, right?
Right.
And I know that I am perpetuating some of that kind of negative association with food.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
we've
Right.
had those conversations, and it's a balance that we all have to do because we
Uh-huh.
want to teach healthy eating habits.
Right.
At the same time, we want to allow them to learn their healthy eating habits. So it's not something that as soon as they leave the house, they eat everything they can that they're not able to when they're in the
Right.
house.
Oh my God. Exactly. Yeah.
Because I know for myself,
Woo.
as a child, I was a binge eater because we didn't have a
Me,
lot of money. So we didn't have a lot of food in the
me too.
house. So whenever I had money, I would go buy food. And it
Me
would
too.
typically be unhealthy food because that's what I could afford. And then I would hide it in my room
Yeah.
because it
Me
wasn't that
too.
I didn't want my parents to eat it, but it was, hey, we don't have a lot of food and I want to make sure I have something if I'm hungry later.
Right.
So I got into that pattern. And even today, as an adult, I always have
Yeah.
food with me. And I
Yeah.
have food in my cabinets that
I
I'll
have
probably
snacks. I
never
have snacks
eat.
with me all the time. Yeah.
But I have food in my cabinets I'll probably never eat. And it's because
Right.
I had times growing up as a child where we did not have food. And I'm
Hmm.
so afraid of being in a home without food that I don't
Right.
throw food away. Like if
Right.
it's gone bad, like moldy or
Yeah.
what, of course I throw that away. But canned
Right.
foods or like those types of things, I will save it, even if it's something I know I don't want to eat. It's like, well,
You
you know
still
what?
keep.
If something bad happens, at
I
least I
have
know I
my
have
can.
food.
It was the same for me, by the way. We couldn't eat good foods either. When we first arrived to New York, we had to buy cheap stuff. So it was never like we had a good dinner. It was macaroni and cheese, it was Cheerios with whole milk and the cheapest milk you could possibly get. So what I did too, like what I do now, is we go to the supermarket and I pick like the best milk that you could get. And Dan's like, why do you have to get this? This is the same milk. I'm like, no, I'm buying best milk. So
Oh, see, I'm the
it's
exact
so
opposite. I'm still super frugal because like there's certain things that I cannot do the
good.
generic. But
Uh-huh.
most of
Right,
the
right, right.
foods and most of the things I
Yes.
purchase, I get the very cheapest thing. Even if I don't need it,
Okay.
if it's on sale, I get it because I'm like, oh, well, it's on sale. So I'll
I
figure
should
out how
get
I'm going
it.
to use it. Yeah.
See, I wanted to like overcome the fact that we didn't have good food. And now I'm like getting good food. But it's like at the same time, it's not true that if you get the most expensive type of milk, that doesn't mean it's the healthiest, you know?
Right.
And so, right. So I get that. And so there are certain things I like compromise on, right? Like when it comes to bread, I want really good bread. But when it comes to like milk lately, I'm like, okay, you can get that one. When it comes to eggs, I get really good eggs. So it's actually good eggs, good milk, good bread, and then I'm good.
But I mean, how this all comes down to size is if we think about the additives and the preservatives that have shifted how we keep weight. And if you
Right.
look at the
Right.
cortisol levels of people, we all know that when our cortisol increases, our
Right.
body
Right.
mass changes. And the
Right. Right.
stress that is surrounding us as people has impacted that. Like we have more people who are overweight today than we've ever had. And I really
Yes.
strongly believe that it's because of stress. It's because of the way our food is
And
created and preserved.
100%. 100%. And
Mhm.
to your point, yes, like, what contributes to people gaining weight or losing weight, a lot of stressors in life. It's not just food,
Mhm.
right? We did come back from Greece last year, September of last year, and my
Mhm.
husband literally went through a depression about food because
Mhm.
everything there was so fresh. You couldn't buy a box of cereal. You just couldn't.
Mhm.
So it was so fresh the entire time. And I never got sick, thank God. Some people when they travel, right? But I was
Right.
fine. We even went to a street cafe in like the middle of nowhere, not a touristic place. So it was genuine a Greek restaurant. And I was like, oh my God, that looks like really fatty. Like that meat, I think it was lamb. That looks really fatty. Is that gonna be good for me? Whatever. No problems. We got
Mhm.
back and we went to breakfast with my dad and we went to Dennis. And my husband was like, I don't want anything. I just don't want anything. This is horrible. Like we were
Yeah.
eating little bites of everything in Greece. So culturally speaking, let me tell you, huge difference how
Mhm.
most of the world eats compared to America, which
Mhm.
is which is really sad because we are in so many levels advanced and we really can't get this food thing down because of so many, right? So for so many reasons. For me, it's obviously all about money, but it was like I can't believe it. Like this is really what sometimes I think my son's autism, there has something to do with the food or what is it, right? In so many levels, right? The what I do want to say, I think we're almost at the end, but I hope more women and men at this point of their lives or at this point of history, it doesn't matter how old they are, they really do the work that it takes to feel good about themselves. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's hard work. It's actually quite simpler to love
Mhm.
yourself than it is to hate yourself. It's a lot
Mhm.
easier. And
It's the whole
I
idea of
hope
it's
that
easier. It takes less muscles to smile than it does to frown.
yes, even
Mhm.
though today's one of those days where I don't want to smile.
I hear you.
Yes, yes, yeah. I hope your audience feels that from
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Well, our audience,
Yes. Okay.
because we have quite a few people who watch because of both of us. So,
That's
um,
awesome. That's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So
Um,
I want to thank you, Jen. I know we're
mhm.
at time and we want to honor
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much for continuing to share your
Always.
thoughts, and the
Absolutely.
conversation is always so wonderful. Next month,
Thank
we're
you.
going to talk about religious imperialism and the impact of religion
Ooh.
on how we navigate our world and our spaces. And I think it's
Oh
going to
my
be a
God.
really
I
good
have so much to
conversation.
share about that.
I know. I think it's going to be a great conversation. So, thank you
Yeah.
again for jumping
Thanks for
on.
having me.
And everyone for
Absolutely.
listening, thank you so much. Make sure you check out other videos that we have in our YouTube account and
Mhm.
our Spotify account. We have additional episodes around the concept of sizeism, specifically to corporate spaces and education spaces. So, thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again next month.
Bye, everybody.